Hello.
All right. Welcome to Life in Real Estate. I'm here with my good friend, Tim Meduna.
Hello.
Tim is a loan officer at Northern Mortgage.
Yes, ma'am.
So today, we're going to talk about the proposed NAR settlement with the DOJ.
Yes. We were talking earlier. There's really three kind of main points that we're going to talk about quickly. But again, at this point of time that we're shooting this, nothing's set in stone yet.
Correct. Let me just go back a second.
Mhm.
So for our viewers who don't know what NAR
Yep.
is, NAR is the National Association of Realtors.
Yes.
And local and state
Mhm.
associations in the United States,
Mhm.
most of them belong to NAR.
Okay.
And so NAR represented those
Okay.
associations
Mhm.
in the lawsuit. So NAR is the National Association of Realtors. And the DOJ had been looking into how we as realtors
Mhm.
and associations have been conducting business. So anyway,
So
you're
that's
right.
where we're at.
That's where we're at. And there are basically three main points we want to cover today because it's proposed settlement. It's
Yep.
not a final settlement.
Correct.
So let's talk about those.
What's the number one?
I think the number one thing is the DOJ said, hey, we don't think that sellers are being advised strongly enough that they have an opportunity to negotiate a commission that they're prepared to pay.
Okay.
Because traditionally, and for many years, a seller would be also paying the buyer's agent and not the agent. So it was a broker to broker relationship, right? And that percentage would be different depending on the state or the local association or how the individual agents and brokerages worked on that compensation, right?
Yeah.
So they just said, hey, you need to advise them more strongly that they have an opportunity to negotiate that.
Yep.
Okay, well, me as an agent, I've always done that anyway. Hey, Mr., Mrs. Seller, Ms., Mr., you have the option to negotiate the commission you're willing to pay.
100%.
Right? So let's talk about that one first because to me, at least for me as an agent, there's not a whole lot of change there other than just I will continue to emphasize that and provide the pros and the cons. I mean, there are definitely cons, I'm not going to lie, to a seller if they say I'm not offering any compensation to the buyer agent. So for me, there's not a whole lot there.
Well, I think top agents that have been doing this long enough and do a great job for their clients will be, a lot of this isn't going to change. They always have those tough conversations, talk about the differences with how to, commissions and all that stuff get paid. So really the top agents, I don't think this is really going to affect most of you guys. But it's a conversation to have.
It is. And I thought it was important to have because there's a lot of media attention and they're not getting it right. It's very selective and it's in some cases outrageous. So I wanted to do this with you as a lender because it doesn't just impact the agent client relationship. No,
there's a lot more.
There's a lot more. So that's the first thing. Sellers, you have always had the option to negotiate a commission. You will continue to have that opportunity. What might happen with some sellers is they don't want to offer compensation. And it's up to me as your listing agent or whoever the listing agent is to make sure that you are well aware of the pros and cons before you make that decision.
100%.
Let's talk about the second thing. There's more impact on a buyer's agent. Yeah, for sure. So traditionally, as a buyer's agent, I could, meet a client and they say, hey, Tammy, this house just popped up. can I see it at 2:00 today? I'd schedule a showing, say, great, yes. One huge difference with this proposed settlement is that I can no longer do that unless that buyer, that potential buyer, has signed what is called a buyer's agency contract.
Yep.
And within that contract, all the terms and conditions are already laid out, meaning, hey, we have to have a tough conversation about if a seller is not willing to offer compensation, how am I as your agent going to be compensated? Let's talk about those options. But I can't even show them that house until I have that in place.
You got to do a little bit more legwork up front. And those quick, hey, can I go see this now? First time you talk to clients, that's going to probably, not be happening anymore. But it's just doing a little extra legwork up front to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's, which I know with working with you for years now, I know you do.
Yes. And with not all brokerages in the past have required an agent, a buyer's agent, to have a buyer's agency contract in place.
Yep.
The brokerage I work with, which is 5-star, has always required it. And so that was not an issue. The difference is, one, it needs to be in place before I show them a house now. And two, the big thing is we have to agree on potential compensation.
Okay.
So that's a big thing. Here's and we'll get into the lending side in a second, because that's a big part of it that no one's really talking about that needs to be talked about. But for me, it's becoming challenging because in our market, there are offer deadlines all over the place.
Yeah.
What does that mean? An offer deadline means that house goes on the market, say on a Friday, and by Monday at 10 a.m., all offers are due. Well, that really puts a lot more pressure and stress on a buyer's agent to get the documentation in place if they don't already have that, if these are new buyers, right? To be able to get all of that in place before they can even show that home.
Yeah.
Because now there are offer deadlines.
I think that's one thing we're going to see get extended out, possibly. Again,
I
none
hope
of this
so.
is all set in stone
No,
yet.
this is not
but
proposed.
A lot of this stuff is we're kind of just going with it as more information comes out. That on our side we're going to be doing the same thing. Because I've had a lot of questions asked about the lending side of things, and that's really the third point that we want to talk about. I think in the end, if the lender and the real estate agent have to work more closely as a team than ever.
Yes, absolutely. And on the front end.
On the front end,
not in the middle.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, you're going to do a lot more work up front, but we are as well on the lending side. Because us as the lender, we have to double check and triple check all the documents, make sure that usually there used to be 3 buckets of money we'd always talk to clients about. Down payment, your closing costs, and your escrow, and then maybe if you need an appraisal gap. Well, then now we have to add that 4th bucket that might be the agent compensation, or how we're going to come about that. So I think we need to really dive into clients' documents. The, hey, give me a pre-approval letter in an hour days might not be there right now. Because we got to make sure that we dive into that even more. Because before you go and start showing houses, we got to make sure we do our job on our side. And I think that's really going to unify the lender real estate partnership even more.
And so let's talk a little bit about, while we're waiting for this settlement to be finalized, we still know that we're making changes and we're making assumptions based on what's proposed. So let's go through a couple of scenarios and how together we're working through those in real time with these proposed settlement guidelines. Okay. So let's go through an example where, I've advised my seller on the risks, the upside and the downside of not offering any commission to a buyer's agent, right? And they just say, I'm not going to do it. They offer to compensate me, but they choose not to compensate that buyer's agent. The other thing, quickly I want to bring up, because this is really important too, is that part of this proposed settlement, we are no longer allowed to put on our MLS, multiple listing service, which is where all of the homes available within a certain area are available, or that have sold or that are pending, where every agent goes to find homes for their buyers. We are no longer allowed under this proposed settlement, which we expect will be accepted and finalized in sometime in July, to put a commission that may be offered to a buyer's agent.
Yep.
It can't be there. So before, we felt like, and I believed in this strongly, it was great for transparency, because every time I would look, I knew as a buyer's agent what my compensation would be if I brought that seller, the buyer, right?
Yeah.
Now there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing going to be listed there, which means as the buyer's agent, not only am I having to negotiate up front and have the conversation with my buyer on what fair compensation would be if a seller's not offering it, but now I also have to find out on every home I'm showing if the seller may be offering anything.
Well, yeah, because obviously that's the compensation part of your side, but also we need to make sure that those funds maybe aren't coming from the buyer's pool of money in a way.
So in that scenario where the seller's not offering anything, and you have a buyer's agent and their client coming to you saying, Tim, help us out here. What are you doing right now?
So I think there's really going to be 4 different ways deals will go through.
Okay.
Basically, number 1, the way it always used to be, where the listing side kind of takes care of it. 2, the buyer pays for the compensation part. 3, seller concessions is when the seller contributes some funds towards closing costs or escrow. Now we might just have to put that towards the compensation.
So let's just clarify for some viewers. So a buyer's agent commission can be considered part of closing costs and seller concessions.
Yes, as of now, that's the way it seems like it's going to be. Obviously, yes, it's learning something new every day.
It is.
I know VA loans are, you can't have it that way, so there's going to be some differences. Again, we don't know exactly all the details of it, but once it does come out, we'll be talking about it again.
Absolutely.
And then the 4th scenario would be if the client has 20% to put down, maybe now they're only putting 18% down or 17% down. It just, we can structure the down payment so that we can still add in that compensation.
And I think based on those 4 options, and I agree, those are basically the 4 options. It's really an important discussion with the agent, the client, and the lender, because you are in a position where you have to help them understand. Listen, great, you're putting down 20%, and we know that there are a lot of benefits when you put down 20%. But if you put just 18 down now, here's what changes. And the risk and potential rewards of that, and is it worth it? Right? And I think that's with any of those. Any of those will be opportunities. All of this, I think, just brings more opportunity for a much tighter relationship and transparency and understanding and education between the agent, the lender, and the client.
Yeah, I think the education part is the biggest thing. And for us, we like to bring clients into the office and show them the numbers. I'm a visual person myself.
I am too.
I feel like a lot of people are. And just being able to say, hey, this is this scenario, here's scenario 2, scenario 3, and really explain it so that before they even start looking at homes, they have a really good grasp of what's going on. So,
I agree. And I think
this is an ever-changing thing that's going on.
It is. We'll continue to have conversations to update our viewers. But in the meantime, the way I want to close this is only to say, listen, if you're a buyer or a seller Make sure you're getting the real story on what's going on.
Yes.
Do not believe everything you're reading in the headlines. Contact your agent or your lender and get the real story. Would you agree?
I would agree.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.